Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. This week, Kuala Lumpur hosted the first Southeast Asia Red Cross Red Crescent Humanitarian Forum. It's a timely gathering, as in today's conflicts, even the most basic protections for civilians are ignored with appalling impunity. But can international law still protect humanity in war? Or are the rules being eroded beyond repair? Well, joining me on the show to discuss this further, I have Reggie Savios, who is the Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific for the International Committee of the Red Cross, also known as the ICRC. Reggie, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thank you.
Let's start with the big picture, if we may. Talk to us a little bit about the work that the ICRC does here in Asia Pacific. And I'm just wondering, based on the work that you do, how then would you describe the state of humanitarian needs and challenges in this region?
Thank you very much, Melissa, for the invitation to be with you. And if you allow me, I would start first probably by explaining you who we are as the International Committee of the Red Cross. So the International Committee of the Red Cross has this very specific mandate to protect and assist people in situations of armed conflict. I think it's very important to mention it, as there is this understanding. So if I simplify for the audience today, I think every time you will have a situation of armed conflict, you will probably see ICRC delegates around. But we also have this very specific mandate to promote greater compliance for international humanitarian law. We are often called the guardian of international humanitarian law amongst the humanitarian sector. And of course, we are part of the movement of the Red Cross and Red Crescent family. And in that regard, I think one of the first points I want to make, because we had this humanitarian forum, but we also had this Southeast Asia National Society Leaders Meeting, and I think you are a region which very strong national societies, and of course they are a very strong vector and a strong voice, not only in the response to humanitarian needs, but also in the promotion of international humanitarian law and in the promotion of the humanitarian principles of neutrality, impartiality, and independence, which are guiding the work of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. That said,
please finish.
That said, if I look now, how do these activities of the International Committee of the Red Cross translate in the different situations of armed conflict in the region? I will start by one of the activities which we are quite known for. It's the visit to prisoners. And so if I take the example of Asia Pacific, we have been visiting prisoners in Afghanistan for decades. We are also visiting prisoners who were arrested in Afghanistan and who are detained today or were detained in Guantanamo Bay, for example. Not long ago, when you had this escalation of hostilities between Cambodia and Thailand, we were also the organization that was mandated to visit the prisoners of war. We have also been visiting prisoners, for years in the Philippines during the different non-international armed conflicts that have happened in countries. So the visit to prisoners and maintaining the family links between the prisoners and their families is one of the activity which we have been conducted since the creation of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Wow. In parallel to this activity, and we will put that, I mentioned that we are protection and we are assistance. So this is protection. Under protection, we also have an activity which I think is extremely central and important, which we are conducted together with the full network of Red Cross and Red Crescent societies around the world. It is the re-establishment of family links. Because as you can imagine, in this region there are millions of displaced people. There are still conflicts ongoing, like in Myanmar. So you have families who just have to leave everything behind. Yes. They have just to take this decision. You see that now a military operation is happening. You have to decide, should I go? What do I take with me? Where am I going? And on the way, you might have elderly people remaining behind, and they are losing the contacts with family members. So as the ICRC, together with volunteers of the Red Cross, we try to find the information to be able to put them back in contact with family members. And this is happening again all over the world and also here in this region. And something also that might be less known by, your audience is when you are looking for family members, some might become missing. We don't find them anymore, or they have been killed and they were sort of in a graveyard somewhere, but the family was never informed or wouldn't know if they are still alive or not alive. So here in the Asia Pacific, we have still very important missing files we are dealing with, like, for example, the post-war situation in Sri Lanka. So there are still thousands of families who are waiting to get confirmation whether their beloved one are still alive or dead. You have the same type of the situation, you probably hear about the Marawi situation in the Philippines. I say we have situations like that probably in Afghanistan also. So in most of the situations of armed conflict, you will find yourself with this situation, with people getting missing. And again, we have the chance to have this largest network of volunteers in the world, 16 million people of volunteers around the world. So they are working as a network under our coordination to try to put all these families together.
Is that also happening in Gaza? I can imagine, there's been the term of wounded child, no surviving family. That acronym has turned out in the medical terms. Has it been difficult to try and re-establish family links for the genocide happening in Gaza?
I think, I was myself in the Gaza Strip,
yes.
before taking this position of regional director. So I think, of course, if we look at the situation of Gaza, and I will just use here the words of the president of the ICRC, I think the humanitarian situation goes beyond description. If you look at how horrible the situation can be, and our president was also saying, I think it surpasses, every legal, moral, and human standard. So I think in there, I think it has. We have tried as much as we could to reconnect sort of families, but you can imagine that you don't move very easily around the Gaza Strip. It's a very small territory, so people know each other, of course, because it's. But still, it is not easy to just go and reach the people, to be able somehow to bring them back, within their family cycle, Yeah. So it is a difficulty, but this is something I think with our team, which are, of course, always trying to do. But if I can also add on the activities, and then we can make the link also with the different countries around the world where we will, and also Asia Pacific. I mentioned about protection, but we of course have assistance. And here I think I will not go into all the detail, but of course you have all the health activities. So again, as an example, we are supporting more than 47 primary health clinics in Afghanistan together with the Afghan Red Crescent Society. We are also supporting like 7 physical rehabilitation centers program in Afghanistan. We have also having programs of prevention around, again, the risk of mines, and I think this is one of the issues which is very prominent in this region. So all around the health issue. And just to give you also an example of how our programs are designed, every single employee of our physical rehabilitation center in Afghanistan are themselves disabled or were themselves victims of mines. And so we take them into the center, we train them to become, because they have gone through that experience, and then they can basically look around. Then in parallel, we have, of course, economic security. So this is, and there you can have a full range of program, of course. It goes from food distribution to microeconomic initiative to a vocational training program. And we are always trying to target the most vulnerable population. So for example, women household related to our programs. You would have single women households, yes, and all that. So in order to try to bring them back on their feet, try to have a life which come back to a certain level of normality, which is never really easy, of course, in this situation. And last, you have also water and habitat project, I think, which are the sort of, if I take the example of the Gaza Strip, because you mentioned it, it can be very simple water trucking for the population. So to the repair of some rather complex water system, so that the population can still have access to clean water. Because if you don't have access to clean water, you will have like diseases and you will have all additional problems that will go out. So if I take sort of the full range of the activities at the ICRC, because if I take the last pillar, and this is one of the most important, prevention and preparedness. So, and this is, I think, where in the region there is a lot we can do. You know, I think we have to make sure that people are prepared to assume their responsibilities under international humanitarian law. So it's the promotion of international humanitarian law.
Right.
That's really important.
Okay, you've given me a lot to work with, and I have many questions to ask you, but I want to kind of focus on the first one that you talked about in terms of the promoting the greater protection of international humanitarian law. Today is marks a year since the ICRC and a group of states launched the global initiative to renew political will for international humanitarian law. I want to talk a little bit about that because I'm curious to understand what this focus is on renewing political will. Given that today Gaza is of course top of mind for many, and the situation in Gaza has said a lot about the state of respect for the rule, or the disrespect for the rules of war. So talk to me a little bit about this global initiative and what it aims to achieve.
Now, thank you for that question, I think. And I think the question could not be more pertinent. And here, of course, we see on a daily basis pictures of conflicts around the world, be it the Gaza Strip, be it Sudan, be it many other places. And we see live these too many violations of international humanitarian law. There is a far too permissive way of interpreting international humanitarian law. And here, just as a reminder, every country around the world have signed the Geneva Convention. Every country around the world have accepted these obligations to respect international humanitarian law. And as a reminder again, because I think this is very much critical to me, these laws were basically sort of agreed upon after the Second World War. And the message to the world was, there is a standard of humanity under which we don't want to go as human beings. So we are not killing children. We are not attacking hospitals. We are not torturing prisoners. Because if we do so, we are not going to be able to live together on this planet. So this came after the Second World War, also based on the experience, and I could speak about it because I was in Japan not long ago. I spoke to Ibakushas, you know, the victims of nuclear weapons. And of course, each leader in the world, they should listen to Ibakusha. If you listen to what it meant, a nuclear bomb, and this was all the idea of international humanitarian law. Even wars have limits. We have to put certain limits to war. And our president, Mirjana Spoljaric, I think, and our colleagues, we are present in more than 100 conflicts. We are very much at the forefront of these responses. We see on a daily basis this violation. We see the impact for people. We see all this unnecessary suffering. And again, I say unnecessary because none of this suffering would be inevitable if international humanitarian law would be respected. And this is why she decided, together with 6 states, and these 6 states are Brazil, China, Jordan, France, Kazakhstan, and South Africa, together with the ICRC. I mean, it represents sort of the diversity of the world globally, to launch this initiative whereby she's asking each world leader in this world to recommit to international humanitarian law and to make it a political priority. So that is basically mobilizing world leaders of this world to basically reconfirm that they abide by these obligations and that they will respect it. And by doing so, that we will avoid the costs of the wars that we see today, again, simply by watching the news. And here I'm always giving that example because, you know, I'm born in Switzerland, one of the most peaceful countries, and I have 2 children. And when I look at that, and this is very much important, you know, if this is the standard we see on TV that we are accepting, that is the standard I will accept for my children if one day there is a war in Switzerland. And this is what definitely I don't want to happen as a father of 2 children. So I think we need to call the world to say, we have to stand up to defend that, because if not, we are back to barbaric times. This is a little bit what it will be. Our world will become barbaric. And here we have to say, and I think on a positive note, that we are very much encouraged by the fact that today we have already 90 states who have joined this initiative. And this initiative, I think, just to describe you what it is about, you know, it is composed of 7 work streams. And among these work streams, you have the one who are on prevention. How can we prevent violation of IHL? And then how can we give effective protection to the people in situation of armed conflict? And there have been already consultation, state consultation, expert consultation, and a progress report will be released in September. And then we will go into a second round of consultation, and it will culminate with a conference in 2026 that was announced by the 6 founding states, whereby there will be a conference on upholding humanity in war, you know, like, so that basically, and the idea is to just produce very concrete and actionable recommendations, which basically then every country can include into, like, the army's military practice, for example, in order again to avoid this unnecessary suffering. So it is a 2 years long initiative that has been launched, and again with the real objective to say we need to reverse that negative trend and make sure that this is not the standards which will be applicable in the future.
So help me understand. Is it really so? Is the real issue with the current normalization of the flouting of the rules of war, is the issue getting a recommitment for upholding and protecting international humanitarian law, or is it about accountability, or showing that there is accountability and repercussions for flouting the rules of law?
Yeah. No, the law itself is not the problem.
Okay.
Not at all.
Absolutely.
I think again, as I was mentioning, these laws were just created after the Second World War. They remain as relevant as ever.
Absolutely.
The problem is the accountability and respect for the law. I can guarantee to you, I have been, as in my previous postings, I was at the front line in the international armed conflict between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. I then was, before that, in Tigray, you know, in Ethiopia. After that, I went into Israel and occupied territories. I can just tell you, if just accountability will be there in the respect of international humanitarian law, we would see far less, again, of this suffering. IHL is not a relic of the past. IHL is totally relevant for today's armed conflict. Saying so, there are certain domains in which we will need to reflect how IHL will be applicable. And this is part of the 7 work streams I just mentioned. And I think there are 3 work streams I wanted to highlight, or at least 2 for this region. One is all what touches upon new technologies of warfare. Because of course, when IHL was being designed, we didn't have drones, we didn't have artificial, we hadn't got, and this is the new reality of our world. Right. When we are speaking here, there are probably a lot of digital type of confrontations happening without even us having realizing, you know, that this is happening. So how are we going to regulate the use of these new technologies of warfare so that they are somehow compatible with international humanitarian law? So typically we are saying we don't want to delegate the responsibility of killing people to machines. So where will be the accountability? So we need to keep a minimum of human dimension. Another one which I think is really pertinent for this region, it is a work stream in this which is called IHL, International Humanitarian Law and Peace. Because I'm a strong believer that if you don't respect the basic principle of international humanitarian law, you will have huge difficulty to get into, like, reconciliation and processes of peace moving forward. So what we are saying, our president is saying, you know, like, humanitarian issues are often the first step towards peace, you know. And here I can give you again an example. when we are in the Gaza Strip, you know, when suddenly, and that's where you bring in this neutral intermediary role of the ICC and this principle. When there is mediation between Qatar, supported by the US, Egypt, Israel, Hamas, and you get to an agreement for the release of hostages and release of prisoners in parallel, you would call an organization like the ICC to come in and to play that particular role. So as you know, we brought back hostages from the Gaza Strip. We participated in the release of these 1,700 Palestinian prisoners. We were called to do that. Lately, you might have seen Republic Democratic of Congo. There were more than 1,300, I think 1,300 prisoners disarmed in Goma, which the ICC transported back into Kinshasa so that they will be back with their families. But for that to happen, and I come back to this political will, you need the political will of the parties. We are not the one who will negotiating these agreements. But then, if it is happening, and when these discussions start happening, we had the same example in Yemen. More than 1,000 prisoners we brought back in an exchange of prisoners operation. You call a neutral intermediary like the ICC, and then it might trigger this discussion. Colombia with the missing file. So we very much encourage also, when there are situations of armed conflicts, to start by discussing very basic humanitarian issues and try to find solutions to them, which might then lead to discussions which are not ours, far more difficult around political issues. You know, this is a bit how it would work.
Okay, so talk to me about what ASEAN governments can do. When you work in this region, are there concrete concrete steps that member states of ASEAN can take in terms of upholding this political will? So either take individually as countries or collectively as a bloc to uphold and promote international humanitarian law.
First, let me start by saying that we have been engaging with ASEAN a lot and with the HAHA Center, you know, which is a humanitarian branch of ASEAN, because we also see this region as really important to the ICC. I think for different reasons. I think this region could be a real example of also a platform where countries are still speaking to each other, where they are trying to find solutions, you know, which is not the case in many places around the world today. Sure. So we are really hoping that we can sort of have ASEAN countries and the ASEAN platform as sort of the best practice or the example in showing how important these rules of international humanitarian law and have this political commitment. Now, what can countries do? The first thing they can do, I think it's, and this has been an initiative since long, it's what we call bring international humanitarian law home. So that means you need to have this conversation about what international humanitarian law is about. You need to have investment into international humanitarian law. Our president is saying, you know, today one of the main issues, I suppose, in your country, in my country, in every country invests more into defense budget. If you invest into defense budget, you need to invest into international humanitarian law in parallel. You have to, because your armies must be trained. They must know how can I basically implement these rules in situation of armed conflict. So at the ICC, we try to work with many armies in advising, in bringing in what we saw from the field, in trying to help them train, you know, like their different armies. We have done that since way, because one of the activities we do also is we monitor the conduct of hostilities, and in a bilateral confidential dialogue, we come back to them to complain if we have the impression that they have not, or factually the impression that they have not respected international humanitarian law. So there is a lot about training. Then there is academics, you know, of course, also on IHL, on that. It's important that all laws that are being sort of produced are aligned and compatible with international humanitarian law. And here, I think there is also the importance of protecting the Red Cross and this neutral, independent humanitarian action. So there is a lot you can do, and today in that Southeast Asia National Society leaders, I was also very much encouraged how the youth can play a very important role, because I think they realize how important it is. And to demystify the things, international humanitarian law is very pragmatic, you know. You don't need to go 50 years at university to understand I'm not going to kill children who are just playing football in the street. I'm not going to drop bomb in the middle of a village where I will kill the entire. So I think we have to just demystify and bring it back. So that's bring IHL home. Then another thing that we are calling, of course, upon is that many more ASEAN countries join this initiative and that your leaders speak out in support of international humanitarian law. And here we are, again, very much pleased that today we have 12 countries in Asia Pacific who have joined already, and we have many who are also co-chair of our work stream. So, for example, the Philippines is co-chair of a work stream of National IHL Committee. So they are leading on this consultation. And each country should have a National IHL Committee with different ministries to discuss IHL issue and the rules. In parallel, we have Indonesia, who is working on a very important work stream from this region, naval warfare. How are you going to protect your people? How are you going to, where will you keep your prisoners if there is a conflict at sea? And I think we have all lost experience into what is happening at sea. And again, in that regard, I think this requires investment. You know, I mean, when I'm always saying, when you are in a country at peace, you might not see the added value of IHL. I can tell you when you speak about family in Gaza, or families in Myanmar, or families in Afghanistan, they immediately understand why we have, as political leaders, to stand up in support of international humanitarian law.
Regis, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing some of these really important reminders for us today. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
That's all the time we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.